I came on board. Part of the process had already been done, and that was the needs analysis. Spending time with hospitals and with healthcare professionals in Turkey and local experts to find out what were the actual needs of the doctors and nurses in Turkey. And part of the development process is really key to any course book written for people working in a particular sector, and more importantly, I believe strongly in the healthcare sector more than any other. And that's really to analyze the situation, to find out where their current strengths and weaknesses are, and how we can develop those through a course book that is really targeted to the nurses and the doctors working in healthcare in Turkey. I'm used to working on course books which are for a global market, and so we make a lot of assumptions about what might be useful in India compared with what might be useful in the UK. And of course, those are, you know, we have to sort of work on transferable skills. But what I believe here with Highway is that it really does target those real needs of people working here in Turkey. And what are those real needs? Well, they came out from the needs analysis, and this needs analysis was incredible. It was highly detailed, possibly the most detailed needs analysis that I've ever been presented with, which is all credit to Ben and his team, I believe. So what came out of that then, I take and my colleagues took as a basis through which to develop the course book, and working with a co-author for the nursing book who has experience or had experience in Turkey was also highly beneficial as well, because obviously he was able to add an aspect that I might not have been aware of, and then to further develop that and further understand the needs, the local needs. We did work with local experts as well on particular aspects of the course, and I can highlight those a bit later on. So that needs analysis then fed into a methodology, which is obviously very important as well, and how the course is devised and then structured. So we look at our target audience based on the needs analysis, and we look at where those people are working and what their particular needs might be, and who are their patients most critically as well, because that's also a key element in healthcare for in healthcare, in English for healthcare provision, if you like. So we found out that the target audience in Turkey, aside from the regular tourists that they might come across in emergency care in particular, there's also healthcare tourists as well. So those people coming for healthcare provision from other countries who might, you know, seek healthcare provision in Turkey. Also, their patients might be refugees as well as of course expats and people who work in Turkey and use English as a means of communication, as a lingua franca. So those are quite interesting target audiences, and not forgetting, of course, that Turkish doctors and nurses also, well, doctors in particular, also might need to present and to write in English as well when they attend conferences abroad, and also when they receive overseas healthcare professionals working with them as well. They may need to communicate in English with them as well in the workplace. So that also an aspect of the course too. So we found out our target audience, we found out who their patients are, and as I say, that's really key. Then we need to look at the kind of language that they need on a daily basis in order to communicate with those patients and with those overseas colleagues. So what we did was to look at the functional language, first of all, the skills, that they actually need on a daily basis, those areas that they may not be so strong in, and then we look at the language that they need in order to deliver those skills. What we did was, as I said, to look at the specific skills and then to match the language needed for to enable them to carry out those skills in English. So we're looking at the type of skills like the patient communication skills, the key patient communication skills, and we're looking at things like building rapport with the patient, delivering bad news to a patient, reassuring a patient, working with patients from different age groups. So we're looking a little bit at children, how to work with children, particularly for the nurses book. And we're also looking at diverse patient populations as well. So there was an intercultural element in there that we needed to include too. Particularly if you're working with refugees, and that's some aspect as well. And also when it comes to working with quite often older patients maybe who may be using sort of and to say the correct term here for non-standard medical procedures, and that's something that's a little bit new for me, in fact, as a writer. So that was a really interesting aspect, I felt. And the other areas that that we might need to focus on as well is actually as I say, building rapport but also developing skills that are useful in working with other colleagues, working with overseas colleagues as well. So, sort of discussing confidentiality issues and ethical issues, and then teamwork. Everything around teamwork. So when you're working with overseas professionals and English is the means of communication, there's also that element as well, being able to work effectively as a team in English or through the medium of English, which will be the joint language between those people. So developing those skills was also critical as well, not only for the doctors, but also for the nurses as well. There was definitely an element of teamwork in there as well. The other aspect as well, going back to patient care, is also how to deal with patients and relatives who are a little bit challenging.
Oh, and, this is a new thing, because technically the doctor and the nurse have not only to deal with the patient themselves, they have to just look at their relatives. They have to have a different kind of approach with their relatives, right?
That's right. And I particularly enjoy those working on those particular modules. It's challenging from our perspective as writers to understand. I think the challenging thing for me was to understand the issues that people complain about, and the kinds of situations that Turkish doctors and nurses find themselves in when dealing with relatives and patients, with challenging relatives in particular, that might be different from the context that I usually work in. So when I prepare doctors for the UK, for example. So I understood that relatives in Turkey can be very insistent and very persistent in their requests and in their demands. So how to find a way of enabling these nurses and doctors to manage that, and particularly for nurses course, because the nurses course was a lower level. So the nurses course went from A2 to B1. So if you're not familiar with the European framework, that means a sort of high elementary to low intermediate level of English. So how do you deal with people in a challenging situation when you yourself, your English is not, is not that proficient? So one of the ways that we did that was to use simple techniques, sort of step-by-step approaches that are used in healthcare training anyway, to help them manage these situations and then match the language to those steps. So, for example, for problem solving, there's a 5-step technique. So focus on the common goal, acknowledge the person's point of view, repeat your point of view if necessary, make a suggestion, and check that the other person agrees. So there's like 5 steps. And it's fairly straightforward and makes a lot of sense, I think. And hopefully something that the nurses would know anyway in their own training in Turkey, but then matching the language, the English language, to those steps. So giving them clear and easy structures and sentences for them to use for each of the 5 steps. It helps them manage the situation, and it helps them with their language as well, and they feel much more empowered if they have those sorts of techniques, I think. And that's how we've tried to help them deal with a situation that is challenging in Turkish, let alone in English. Yeah, this I found absolutely fascinating, and we did work with a couple of local experts, and one of them was a trained nurse, and it was very interesting to work with her, because we sort of sat down and said, okay, well, what are the challenges that Turkish nurses, Turkish doctors might face, and can you sort of give me some insight, but also maybe map out possible dialogues that might happen, that might take place between, and it was for this is for the nurses book in particular, between a nurse and a patient or a relative, so that I can understand the types of scenarios, and also I have a more concrete example. I needed concrete examples, because I've only ever been to Turkey once as a tourist, so I really didn't know, and for me as a course book writer, it's really key to work with people in that environment, so that I have so that it can be as authentic as possible, because I can make assumptions or I can read examples, but actually hearing it from somebody who works in that situation in Turkey was so beneficial, and hopefully that then helps the students, that what we're doing is delivering a course which really responds to their needs.